So great to see you again. It's Judy from Coffee, Cookies, and Books, and what we're doing today is going over everything I read in the month of September. So thanks for sticking around for this. So I actually had a pretty good reading month, and I thought what we would do is that we would talk about how much I read and how many pages, that sort of thing. So I've got everything in my book here, so I'm just going to read it all off to you. So in total, technically I read 11 books, but one I DNF'd, so we will talk about that. And it was a total of 3,546 pages that I read. And I can't remember, I think my average was about 3.6, somewhere around there. I actually had a pretty good reading month. I had one DNF, one 2-star, and then everything else was 3.5 and above. So not a bad reading month. And I did actually have one 5-star. So it's pretty happy about that. So I thought what we'd do first is talk about what I didn't read, okay? And I have, because I did have, I think, 14 books picked out, so there was a lot. And these are the ones that I didn't read, so I'll just go through them quickly. So we had Shift by Hugh Howey's second book in the Silo series. I did not read that. How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. Didn't get to that one. I had wanted to get that one and I just didn't have the time to. Her Soul to Take by Harley LaRue, which is like a dark romance. Didn't get that. That's a first in a series, so it's not a big deal. You know, it'll go back on the in the cards. And then Metal Slinger by Rachel Snyder. Didn't get to that one either. Hunting Prince Dracula by Carrie Maniscalco, which is the second in a 4-book series. First one was Stalking Jack the Ripper, and I read that. So maybe a little disappointed that I didn't get to it, but it'll get read. At some point, it'll get read. And the last one was Dissolution by Nicholas Binge. Did not get to this one either. Had hoped to, but 14-book TBR was just not going to happen. So those were all the books that I did not read. The cards are all here. So I still have all of the TBR cards that they're written on. So those are just going to go back into my card selector and they may come up again in the future. So that's that. Now, we will talk about my challenges. So as you know, in September, I did not read any from my 25 and 2025 must-reads because I didn't really have to. I technically only have 2 left besides Heat of the Everflame, which is going on next year's TBR. So the 2 are Bride and by Allie Hazelwood and Wild Side by Elsie Silver. And both those books are going to get read in October and November. So I'm going to finish off more or less what I had picked out. So I didn't read any. So I did read the 2 books from my buzzword reading challenges. So one is the actual buzzword reading challenge and the other is the cover challenge. I'll put them both up here. And the 2 books that I read were Eruption and The Foxglove King, and both got read. So, and I will be reviewing them. I can say that we're completely caught up on both those challenges as well. So let's get into what I read. Now I'm going to actually do these in the order that I read them because that's the order that they're in my my book, because I wrote down, for a change, all of my characters and I taped my reviews in here from Goodreads. So I have everything in front of me so we can get through all of this pretty quickly. All right, let's just start with my DNF because that's the easiest one to start with. And it's a temporary DNF. It is Darksoul by Anna Stevens. This is a fantasy, but it has a very heavy military aspect, particularly in this second book. The first book was not so much. And I think I gave the first book 3.5 stars, I think, if I remember correctly. And I did like the first book. And then I started to read this, and I got, I think, 3 or 4 chapters in, and I'm like, I'm not feeling it right now. And I think I am going to just put this back in the cards with these, and whenever it gets pulled, it gets pulled. But I might actually just pull it myself and read it. It's the second book out of 3. So it is a trilogy, and I have all 3 books, and I would like to read it. I just have to be in the mood for something along these lines. So it's going to go also on this pile here, and the card for it, which is right here, is going to get added. So it will go back into the TBR to hopefully get pulled in the near future for 2026. I know already the rest of this year it's not going to happen. So yeah, we shall see where we go with that. Okay, let's get on to our reviews. The first one that we're going to review is Eruption, which was one of my buzzword challenges. And this is by Michael Crichton and James Patterson. I've read James Patterson, but I've never read any of Michael Crichton's work. And this was after he passed away. So I believe his wife took the book that he had started, because you can read it in the author's notes in the back. And she took that to James Patterson, and they finished the book, and this is what they came up with. And I loved it. I rated it 4.5 stars, thoroughly enjoyed it. What is happening is there are indications on the Big Island that there's going to be an eruption. And so you have all these scientists. You have Mac, who he's the head guy of the organization. They're called the HVO. I can't remember what that stands for, but that's what they're referred to throughout. And Mac is like the head of that. And then there is Jenny, who's kind of like his second in command. Rick, Kenny, Pia, they're all staff that work there. Shit happens throughout the book. I say shit, but it really kind of was shit that happens throughout the book. That is just... it's crazy, especially once the eruption stuff starts happening. It is insane from that point onwards. But even leading into that is also crazy. Then there's a crew that is a company that is a demolition crew that they need to bring in, or they think they need to bring in. And then you have the military aspect, and the military aspect is where things, like, it's off the rails, but good, in a good way. And what the consequences are of if they can't control this lava flow. And as far as history is concerned, there's never been any indication that you could control a lava flow. So that's insane. Like, the whole part of it, even though a little bit of it is sciencey, it's not written in a way that a layperson like myself cannot understand and follow what's going on here. It's crazy. Okay, so the military side of it, and that part is crazy and bad. Okay, and the volcano and the eruption part is really bad. So it's just, I mean, I guess it's one of those disaster stories, but it's so well done because I loved the characters. I loved the characters. So I don't know who the character development came from. I have no idea, because like I said, I've never read any of Michael Crichton's books. Have read James Patterson's books, and I have always liked them. So I think that maybe he injected a lot of that character development. It was just, I enjoyed it. Like I said, I enjoyed it. 4.5 stars. The only reason that I knocked it down a little bit was because in some parts in the beginning, it dragged a little bit, but that's it. So as a thriller, it actually rated pretty high for me, because typically I find most thrillers are 4.0. If I enjoy them, they're like 4.0. This was just a little bit better. So quite enjoyed that book. Okay, so the next one is my other buzzword challenge, and that was the Foxglove King, which is the first book in the, what is it I have here, Nightshade Crown series. And I do have the second book, and the second book is going to go in on my must reads for 2026 to make sure that I get that, because the third book, I believe, has come out already. I loved this, and I gave it 4 stars. The reason I gave it 4 stars is that I did find some of the world building and like the idea of the power and where the power was coming from, particularly for Lore, who is our female main character, that whole background and how that all worked. I found a lot of it convoluted. I do like a story where that happens as the story progressed. That was the case with this book. I just found that some of it didn't tie in together really super well, and particularly the ending kind of got me a little bit there. But overall, I liked the relationship. So there's no, now people have said this is a romance. Barely. This more fantasy with a hint of romance. That's how I see it. Anyways, because there's the 2 guys. There is Gabe Remont, who he is a Presque Mort, which is like a religious sort of group of men, and they control the power that comes from the ground. It's a dark power, and they kind of keep it under control. So Gabe is part of that, but they're like a religious priest. So almost like, I guess, a bit of a Buddhist feel to it was what I got. So he typically doesn't have sex. He doesn't do anything like that, but he's attracted to Lore. So there is that. And then there is Bastian, who is the prince. So the king is his father. And Bastian and Gabe don't like each other. So it's like a triangle, but it's a friendly triangle. It is the best way that I can describe it, because I don't think Bastian hates Gabe. I think he feels empathy for him, sort of. I really liked particularly the feeling when you had the 3 of them on page together. I liked that. But I also liked Lore with Gabe and Lore with Bastian. So kind of those 3 together. Well, I can't say the end of the book, but it was just really great how all of that transpired. The end of the book was a bang, and I really enjoyed that. I think that there were things that were happening through the book that kind of led you to know that Lore was like a disaster waiting to happen, more or less. Right from the beginning, it started like that with her, and it kind of continued, and that was sort of an ongoing feeling through the book. Okay, now there were things that I did guess that would happen, so I thought a little bit was a bit predictable, so probably again another thing that contributed to me only giving it 4 stars. But overall, yeah, I did enjoy it a good bit. And like I said, I do have the second book in the series, The Hemlock Queen. I was trying to think of what the name of it, so I do have that, and I'm looking forward to reading that. 4 stars is nothing to ignore. It is a good rating, and that was how I felt about this book. So those are my 2 buzzword challenges, and I read them, and 1 4.5, 1 4. Figured it was a good, successful read on my buzzword challenges. All right, next book we're going to talk about is an arc I had from Nick Alley. It's called The Bridesmaid by Cate Quinn. So I'll put the book cover up for you. This is I guess almost what could be considered a mystery detective sort of book. I didn't find anything about it particularly thrilling, but the story was good. So I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was actually better than some that I read. Now, I've never read anything by Kate Quinn, so I have no idea how her other stories measure up to this one, but I did actually really like it. So the way the story starts is there is a wedding, and one of the high-profile bridesmaids is murdered right at the beginning of the book. So the groom enlists the help of Holly Stone, who she is a forensic lawyer. She worked for another lawyer up until, I think, shortly before the point of this book. Well, it turns out the victim is this woman that she used to work for. And again, super high profile. High profile that I think, if I remember correctly, the boss had a reality show. And it was because of a disagreement that happened between the two of them about something that was going to happen on the show that they parted ways. Okay. But when Holly found out that it was her that was dead, she was devastated by it. What ends up happening is she ends up having to work with a fellow that's a policeman who she doesn't care for, detective, and the two of them have to kind of go undercover as the replacement bridesmaid. I loved it. I loved that part of it. The only reason I gave it 4 stars was because there's a little bit of drag, again, in some parts. The other thing is that even though you don't like Adriana Kensington, who is the bride and who is a spoiled rich kid bride, but you still feel sympathetic for her. And I think that when I read the synopsis, it makes it sound like she is a bridezilla and that she hates Holly, but that's not how I saw their relationship. Yes, there was an antagonistic side to the relationship and a distrust, but that is because Adriana, she just doesn't trust anybody but Mark, who's the fiance. So she really doesn't trust anybody, but she loves Mark and she really wants to marry Mark. So she has redeeming qualities, which, I loved that part of the book. Mark, on the other hand, came through very cardboard. So he was probably the only character that I kind of felt that way. Because even Adriana's father, who you don't get a lot of glimpses of until the very end of the book, till towards the end of the book, even he came across better. Mark just was kind of floating out there. So those was kind of the areas that I felt dropped it down to a 4, because it could have been a 4.5 or 5, because I quite liked the story of the book. So I liked it that much that if she came out with something else, I would totally read it, like 100%. So this kind of felt right for me. And I think it's because it was kind of almost more a mystery detective type story, which is more my thing. I like thrillers, but I typically don't find them as thrilling as they should be. But this was good. It was good, solid 4 stars, and I would recommend it to anybody. I can't remember when it's coming out. I think it's coming out soon. Is it November? I think it might be coming out in November, because I think, yes, it's coming out in November, because I had it on my November releases. It should be in my November releases video. And so give it a try. I think you'd really like it if you like Kate Quinn. I shouldn't even say that because I've never read any other Kate Quinn, but yeah, I really liked this one. Okay, so let's go on to our next one. And our next one was my only 5-star of the month, and not a surprising 5-star, is the 3rd book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, and it's the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Thoroughly enjoyed it. There's just something about Matt Dinniman's writing on how everything has progressed through the books with both Carl and Princess Donut and everything else. Now, every book is from Carl's point of view. I don't know. I don't think I've heard anybody mention that, but it is, I think, important because you're seeing a ton of Carl's development and also his views on the cat, on Donut. So it's just was fabulous. Now, this book was also insane, okay, because it takes place in a system that is completely controlled by trains. Now, not just subway trains, it's like every train that you could imagine that is on Earth is in this story. And I think that a lot of people would find that very confusing. And I did a little bit in the beginning until it started to evolve. Now, what I said is that the train system is called the Iron Triangle. And that is like an absolutely appropriate because it's like tied up inside a triangle. It's absolutely crazy. It's crazy. Okay. I loved that though, because as it went on, that was what really built the story. The other thing was this book is full of other crawlers. So you're getting a broad view of them all. Like, yeah, I can't say too much because if I say too much, then that's going to give a lot away. Now, the reason it's called Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook is because right near the beginning, when they're in the safe room, because there's these safe rooms that they go to, and they have their manager in their safe room, who is Mordecai, who's become kind of like a friend to Carl and Donut. They go in there to talk to him and to look at all of the special things that they've received. And I should mention that they now have Katya, who is with them, who was technically part of another crawler team, but they kind of saved Katya. So she's sort of with them now, but there's something going on in the background there in relation to the other crawler team. So that's all part of it too. So a little bit of mystery going on there, which I thought was great. But anyways, Carl receives a very special package. I think it was from a sponsor, because now they can get packages from sponsors. And it is the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook. But this is something he can't share with anybody else. And this book, excerpts from it are part of things that Carl remembers that he's read in the book. Because I didn't read it all at once, but he's a reader. So this is established already. So he is actually reading his way through this. But he can also add to the book as a crawler. So he gets an extra pad in his stuff that he can actually write things into this. I think it's fascinating how Dinniman did this. And I'm assuming that that is going to be a carried theme because now he has this cookbook. And I think they call it a cookbook because it is like recipes on how to defeat shit as they're going through, right? It's so good. So freaking good. Now, I did mark something in here, and I think this was a particular package. Now, they have another aspect to their team called Mongo. I'm not going to say what Mongo is. This made me laugh so hard because they're in this fight, okay, and there is gore everywhere because of what's happening in this fight. And then Donut had let Mongo out because what Donut can do is Donut can put Mongo in a case and put her in her storage, okay? But when they let Mongo out, then Mongo is let loose. And so Donut had let Mongo out for about 30 seconds before I made her put him away again. The thing that Mongo is, which I'm not going to say, had gone crazy like that fat kid in the Willy Wonka book who started eating the walls and shit. It's like, oh my God, because they're in the middle of this fight. And you can see, I highlighted this. And this is just like a description of, this bad thing that's going to happen. And it's like, oh my God, that was just like, that kind of thing happens all the time. But it's just like at certain points, it's so funny because of the situation that they're in. And this is Carl, but Carl's thinking. I love Carl's mind. Anyway, 5 stars. I have put, I think, because I have all of them except the 6 ones, or 7 altogether. 7th one just came out. I got that one. I have not bought the 6th one. It's the only one I have not. So I've read 1, 2, and 3. So I've put 4, 5, and 6, which I will be picking up on my list because I've already created my list for next year, my must-read list. And I put those 3 on it because I think I want to read it, but I didn't put the 7th book on. And I think it's because I almost don't want to read the 7th book. I hope he comes out with, I'm sure he's going to come out with another one because I don't think it's going to end on the 7th book. At least I don't think so. Maybe it will. I don't know. Haven't seen any reviews. Don't want to see any reviews. Anyway. So that's that one. My only 5-star. Okay. So the next one that I read is You Are Fatally Invited by Ande Pliego. This was it's a writer's retreat thriller. 4 stars. And I also think it's a debut. I really enjoyed this. I think that the only thing was that some of the story felt a little contrived a bit. I guessed the twist. So what did I say here? I guessed the twist at page 228, and there are 366 pages. So I kind of had I had a distinct feeling about who the you was early on. So I'll explain that in a minute. And along with who the serial killer was in the clue game they had to play. So I think most of the story was easy to guess, but I still enjoyed it. So what you've got technically 5 authors. So there is 6. Rodrigo and Olivia, they're a married couple. Then there is Fletcher, Violet, Ashton. So those are your 1, 2, 3, 4. So yes, 5. Sorry, 5. Then there's Mila, who is technically the event coordinator. She's one of the points of views. Then there's Taryn, who's the maid, and Cliff, who's the chef. Taryn and Cliff, you don't get their points of view in here. So you only get what happens to them, I think, from Mila's point of view, because she views them as her staff, right? For this writer's retreat event. And then there is the 6th author, who is the author who is actually the lead author of the event, who nobody has seen ever. So nobody knows who this author is. And it becomes clear quite early on that it could be one of these people. Okay. Now, did I miss somebody in here? You know what? I think I missed someone. Yeah, who is, hold on one second. Alistair is the missing author. So he's the author that nobody has seen. And he's the one who is essentially running the crazy house, right? But then, hold on, because there is one more author who is important. Cassandra. So Cassandra is the other one. Cassandra is the oldest author out of all of them, okay? And they all write thrillers, and that is why they're at this retreat. So right from the beginning, one of them gets killed. So that's kind of like how things get started. And then it becomes clear that it's a game because they're all guilty of something, okay? And Alistair says they all have to admit what they're guilty of, so on and so forth. But even Mila gets pulled into the game? No. One of the reasons I gave it 4 stars is because Mila's point of view constantly switches between her tense speech to the word you, like she's directing what she's saying to a person. You don't know who that person is. I found that awkward, okay? It didn't flow. It felt choppy, and I was finding I was trying to read over it because I found it confusing. And it kind of petered out a little bit, and it stopped a bit when you got kind of into the middle of the book, and then it started again, not as much later. So it was because one of the writers was somebody that Mila was after, which was why she was there in the first place. Okay, so that's clear right from the beginning, not giving anything away. And Mila's part of this whole game, but then she becomes part of Alistair's game. It's a crazy thing, but I still guessed a lot of it a little bit early, so I think it kind of gave things away just a bit too much, but it was still good. And I read right through to the end, and I actually really liked how it ended, which sometimes in a lot of these books you get a bit disappointed at the end, but I said that I loved the ending. So that is You Are Fatally Invited. Okay, so let's continue on to our next book, and that was another ebook that I read. It was on Kindle Unlimited, and it's the first book in a new series by one of my favorite romance suspense authors, Anna Hackett. It's called Night and Day. It is Langston Hotels Book 1. So first one, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Now, I thought it was a solid start to the series, so we'll see where it goes from there. I just found a little bit, maybe not quite as suspenseful as some of the other series that she writes. And some of the other series that she writes kind of have a bit of a sci-fi romance feel to them, and I like them a lot, but still, it was good. And I would say, like, on the spice scale, probably a 3, maybe 3.5 to 4. Yeah, it was pretty spicy, So what you have is you have this guy, Ambrose Langston. He is a billionaire hotel owner, and he has purchased the hotel where Tessa has been the manager. Now, it's in this town that is, it's called Windward, and it's a very small community. Everybody grew up together. Everybody has history at this hotel, even her. She lost her parents very young, and her aunt, who was, I think, 21 at the time that that Tessa's parents died, took Tessa, managed to get custody of her and raised her. And then when she met and married someone else, raised her with her kids. So it's a beautiful relationship. I loved the relationship, the family dynamics there. It's like, it was fabulous, you know. Then what happens is Ambrose decides, like, him and her are having this back and forth email thing, okay? And he has met her, but very briefly at the beginning when they first bought the hotel. She hates him a bit. She's just very antagonistic towards him, and he finds it funny. So he actually enjoys her emails because they're antagonistic. But he decides, because they have to go to look at the hotel to decide, are they going to upgrade it or are they going to tear it down? So he's got his team and they're all ready to go. But what he's going to do is he drives in, nobody knows he's there, and because they're having this masquerade ball for charity. Of course, him and Tessa hook up at the masquerade ball. They don't know that, and they don't say names, nothing. They just basically, they get it on, screw. They don't even make it, they don't even do it in a bed. It's like up in this dark corner somewhere. It's crazy. It was crazy. But, you know, and then Tessa takes off and he's like, damn. But neither of them know that it's the other. But what I loved was she didn't drag that out, which was a beautiful thing. So it basically, like, the next day, he announces that he's there, and he's going to be staying there with his team, and he meets with her, and she sees the mask that he wore that night, and she's like, hello, it was you and me doing it up here. And he's like, oh shit, because his father constantly messed around with people in the business because he took over the business for his dad. He didn't want to be like his dad right away, you know. things kind of kick off with the two of them. And I thought that was a little fast, but that's actually typical for Anna. She does have a habit of doing that in her books, but I think she handles it pretty well, and handling it that way is great. So I love that part. And then you have the dynamic of things are happening around the hotel. Accidents that could be really, really bad, that somebody could die. In one case, it could have been Tessa, but it looked like it was targeting Ambrose. Well, they call him Moreau. That's his name. So it looked like it was targeting him. So this is happening in the background. It came out who it was. Now, the reason that I gave it, one of the main reasons I gave it 3.5 was right at the beginning when Ambrose arrives and they're talking, there's discussions between Tessa and people that work with her and everything like that. I guessed who the guy was based on some of the things that were happening. Didn't take a genius to figure it out. So that kind of bothered me a little bit. I would have preferred that it was one mention specifically early on that I was like, yeah, it's that guy. If that little detail had been left out early on, it could have been mentioned later. If it was left out early on, then I think it would have flowed, and I would never have guessed who it was. So anyways, so that was the only thing. And of course, I've already loaded in the follow-up book, which I think is Caden's story, and Caden is the security guy who came with Ambrose, so Rowe. So he actually works for him. He's like a big head security guy. And of course, now he's button heads with Allie, who is best friends with Tessa, and how Allie manages all the house staff, like the maids and the bellhops and all that stuff. She manages all those staff. So of course she works at the hotel. So that's the next story. I think it's going to be a good one. That's that one. So next we are on to The Gunslinger, which was a reread for me. I wanted to reread this because I have purchased almost the whole series. I think up to book 6. Can't remember how many books there are in total, but anyway, so I'm pretty close. And I want to read the entire series again. And so I've reread this, and I actually gave it 4 stars. I thought it was pretty good. And then I put the next 2 in my must-reads for next year. It deals with Roland. Roland is the gunslinger. I don't know why I didn't realize it, but I finally did dawn on me as I was going through this book that this is technically a collection of short stories. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 short stories in it, okay? And then each story is broken down. But the way that he put the stories in there, they flow as a whole book. So it kind of reminded me a little bit of the first book that I read from the Witcher series, because it was the same sort of aspect to it a little bit, right? Like it all flows to an ending at the end, but you get some very distinct characters. So of course you have Roland, who's the gunslinger. You have the man in black, who you find out kind of who he is as you get to the end of the story. And then Jake, who is a kid in the story. I think he's 10 to 12, somewhere in that range. And he is a very important person through the book. He's kind of like towards middle to the end of it. Then you have Alice, who was a romantic interest. I wouldn't say romantic, but there was like a sexual content. You don't get any sex on page, but you get the sexual content between the two of them. She's near the beginning and what happens between her and Roland, okay? And how this sort of, the idea of what happened haunts him through it. So I thought that was great. And then even something as simple as a visit to a farmer, and in that visit to the farmer, he tells the story about what happened with Alice. So it really, everything just ties together really nicely. I just felt that even as short as it was, because it's only 250 pages, some aspects felt drawn out a little bit too much, and it was a little bit of sort of this. I know the idea is that he's trying to find the man in black, but it just felt a bit tedious, which is why I gave it 4 stars. But overall, I really liked the book. Yeah, good start, and can't wait to get back into it. It was actually, I think, rereading it, I was able to get into Roland and what was going on with it much better this second time around than I did the first time I read it. And I think the first time I read it, I can't remember when it was first published, like long time ago. Oh no, I think did I write that down? Yeah, I said I read it for the first time in the 80s. I think I appreciated it much more this time around than I did then. So it was great. Next one that I read was Indigo Rage, which is by Devney Perry, and it is a romantic suspense. It was kind of nice to throw that in after everything else that I had read, and it was 4 stars, a good solid 4 stars. I enjoyed it. It's the first book in a series, the Edens series. I think there's 6 books, 5 or 6. So I have the second one and will absolutely read it because I enjoyed this one. So you have Winslow Covington, who female, that's your female main character, and everybody calls her Win. And she is going to this small town to become the chief of police. Her grandfather is the mayor of the town. However, even though there's some people who think that she was given this, no, she actually was interviewed by a lot of people, including Harrison Eden, who will be important. They all interviewed her because her grandfather didn't want the decision to come down to him, and they all agreed that he should hire her. So they brought her in. She was a detective. I can't remember exactly where, but in Montana. So in one of the main cities in Montana. So she was a detective there. So she was coming to this small town in Montana, and she's going to be the chief of police. Okay. So it opens with she's gone to this bar, and it is not the bar that the tourists go to. It is the bar that the townfolk go to. And it's empty, practically empty, and she's there, and everyone's antagonistic towards her, even the bartender, kind of giving her a hard time. And this guy walks in, and it is Griffin Eden. And Griffin is Harrison Eden's oldest son. And the Edens are the people that basically created this town. So they're very important in town. That's why it's called the Eden series. And she's attracted to Griffin. He's attracted to her, but he doesn't know she's going to be the chief of police, and she doesn't know he's Griffin Eden. If she had known his full name, what happened, because they got it on in his truck, okay, so a little bit like the other romance I read, Night and Day. That was it, the email, the one that was an ebook. So that happened right at the beginning, but it was great. And then what happened next was her grandfather takes her for a lunch, and of course they run into Harrison and his son Griffin. It was great. Love the way that started. What I really liked about the book is that there's a murder right at the beginning. Well, it looks like it's somebody who she took her own life. That's what it looks like. But Wynn has her doubts. And there are actual detective police reasons. She doubts the official story that this girl jumped off a cliff herself. Okay? And every single thing that she states is very logical. The reason that she doesn't think is because she thinks that this is a serial killer because of how this resembles some of the other ones, because I've had a ton of suicides in this town, and it's all young people, mostly young women. Now, there are certain outlier cases that she's saying, no, this doesn't, like, you can tell they kind of don't relate to this particular one. She is sure, almost 100% sure. So that kind of leads the story. Where that all leads to kind of puts her and Griffin at loggerheads a bit, okay? But their relationship is developing throughout. Now, their attraction is obvious. He can't stay away from her. Like, he's really, I think, the driving force more than her, okay? Because she's thinking about her position in the town and considering that a little more than he is. But, you know, he shows up at her house constantly and so on. And then they end up at his, like, it's great. And so I liked, even though it was quick, I liked how it developed. I thought it was really great how it developed, but it was still a little bit quick. I know that I have read Devney Perry series before that are older than this series. The writing in this one was definitely better. Okay, I enjoyed her character development. I enjoyed how the story developed. All I can say is, because this had a murder mystery built into it, and it did have a suspense side to it at the end, just how everything came together was fantastic. I really, really loved it. I will say it did deal with dementia and Alzheimer's. She was very delicate about how she dealt with that, but I think that you need to know that going in. And I don't know if there are any trigger warnings at the beginning. I didn't even look because I don't look at trigger warnings. No trigger warnings at the beginning. So that's something you need to know about this one if that kind of bothers you. But otherwise, fantastic book. 4 stars. Can't wait to read the next one. Okay, and the next one was, I think, my lowest rating for the month, and it was called The Lich Before the Darkness by Timothy Stormcrow. It was 2.5 stars. Now, I was asked by the author to read it, and so it was available on Kindle Unlimited. I wanted to make sure he got paid for me reading it, so I read it that way because he offered to give me a copy, and I was like, no, I will read it that way so you get the benefit of me reading it. It was not long. It's only 160 pages. So it's an environment in Great Britain. So they were kind of like London and that kind of area. I think a little bit of the Scottish Highlands might come into play with it. We are there, and there is magic. There's vampires. There's werewolves. I mean, it's everything. Okay. People live in that sort of environment. And the story starts off with this character, Aisling, and she's interviewing for a position with a department that investigates and basically helps people with situations that are magical in nature. So it starts that way. But then it goes to other multiple points of view and background stories that all just kind of get dropped in there. So it's a non-linear timeline. But I felt that there were certain aspects of it that just kind of didn't fit together. It felt like it didn't flow. Like, I know that a good example is Barrier of Bones and Midnight Soil. That was also a non-linear timeline. And there were some aspects of it that I felt could have been needed adjusting a little bit, but I still understood it, okay? And it would jump from like the 1500s to 2019. And then it would go back to the 1500s, and then you'd be in like 1700s or 1900s or 17 or 1800s. Like, so it still made sense though, because the story flowed well. So I never felt like I was lost in it. In this one, I felt at certain points I was lost. I'm like, what was that? Or like, what was that chapter? And he would do it in chapters, right? In chunks. So that kind of bothered me a little bit. And then I wrote down here, like, some things didn't make any sense. So there's this character, Wulfric and Philip, and they don't like each other. They're investigators and they investigate the same thing, but Philip doesn't work for the government. He has his own business, and Wulfric is the government, the head of the government side of things. And they hate each other, and Wulfric is a vampire and Philip's human, essentially. But I think he does a bit of magic. Not so. But there is this smack dab at about 75-80%, there's this chapter that has a TV interview show, and Philip makes an ass of Wulfric on the show, and there was no point to it. Not really. There was kind of a tiny bit of tie-in, but not really. And then at the end of the book, I said, what the hell was that? Because it like dropped right at the end. Now, it ended with a cliffhanger, huge cliffhanger, fine. And I would actually read the next book because I want to know what happened to everybody, because I said the character we started with, Aisling, she got a tiny mention before the end of the book, but where is she? Okay. And then I said Maeve and Michael, who were a pair that also did their own investigating and they were getting their company started. Where were they? I wasn't sure what happened to them after they went to Paris for something. So I'm like, where are they? And then I'm like, it ends with Philip calling 999, which is 911, because he's been attacked and he's going to pass out like it's bad. So that's a cliffhanger, but that's what it is. And that, sorry, I think I gave away the farm on that one, but it was only 160 pages. So I kind of felt that it needed that. I also felt it needed a bit more proof editing. Could have probably done with a developmental edit to kind of rearrange how he had these chapters and where they synced up together, but there were a lot of proofing errors, a good number of them, and I did indicate them all, and I did kind of give my comments on that. And I did say at the end that I felt strongly the book had a lot of potential, because it did. I liked the story, but it needs a good round of proof editing. So that is that one. And now we're on to the last one, which is The Puppet Show by M.W. Craven. And this is the first book in the Washington Poe series, 4.5. Loved it. Absolutely, 100%. The only reason I gave it 4.5, again, was because it dragged in certain parts. And it was some of the investigative parts, which you get because it has to happen. So it is a serial killer murder mystery detective story. Washington Poe is the detective, but he gets teamed up with Matilda Bradshaw. They call her Tilly. And she is, I would say that Tilly could potentially be a high-functioning autistic. She is very unique character, okay? But they never put a label on her. M.W. Craven never labeled her. But what he did was he talked about her in such a way that Poe actually could relate to her on certain aspects, because he felt that they had things in common. Now, he is about 30, and I think she is mid-20s, 26, 25. They're not that far apart in age, but she seems 20. And I think that's because she is brilliant, and she came up in college, and she's got like PhD. I mean, the woman's a genius. He ends up being teamed with her because he needs an analyst. But it's her first time out in the field because they don't think Tilly can handle being out in the field. Tilly, she gets bullied all the time. And right at the beginning, he is in the office because of this case that's happening. He witnesses this, and he tears into the guy who did it, and he's like, he's on it. And she automatically likes him, trusts him, everything. And the thing, I think part of it is because he was bullied when he was young. So he kind of felt for her, and how their relationship develops throughout the book is friggin' fantastic. I can tell you that I've already purchased the second book because I want to know how the rest of the series goes. I can't remember how many books are in the series. 8, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, freaking loved it. Now, I do have another book by M.W. Craven, Fearless, I think, but it's a different series. So it's a different detective, different series. But I can tell you that like look forward to reading it because loved the writing in it. I also, the ending was fantastic. The majority of the book, mostly you're getting kind of Poe, okay? And the ending is all him and how he's dealing with the fallout of the case. That's all I'm going to say because we give it away otherwise. You know, it was such a good book and I loved it so much. So yeah, I can't say enough good things about it. I think that is it. Yes, that is it. I got my DNF is at the very end, but we talked about that at the beginning, so we don't need to talk about that. I think I had a good reading month and enjoyed most of everything I read, even the 2.5. You know, I like 2.5 to me and up. I would potentially, if it's a series, carry on with the series just to see where it goes. If the second book is a 2.5, then I probably won't continue past there. So that's kind of how I look at it. If I gave away any spoilers, I totally apologize. I try not to. Sometimes I get carried away, so that could be the case. If you have any questions about any of the books or you've read any of them, I'd love to hear what you have to say about them. And I'd encourage you to watch my October TBR to see what I have coming up in October. And my November releases TBR was there. Not TBR, my November releases video and my October releases. Some great books coming out between now and the end of November. So definitely check them out and would love it if you could like, subscribe, and comment to the video because that's how my videos get in front of other people. And I am, think, 30 people away or so from 1,000 subscribers. And the more that I get, the more people view. We really love it. The more people enjoyed the videos because that's why we make them, right? So that's it for now. Next video will be Book of the Month and Aardvark and what's available in October on those two. And we will see you in that video.